Welcome to This Explainer, where we're tracing the absolutely massive 50,000-year cause and effect history of Middle-earth. Seriously, if you've only read The Hobbit or watched The Lord of the Rings, you've literally just seen the very tail end of the story. Today, we're taking a huge journey, starting all the way back at the creation of the world and going right up to the fading of the Elder Days. Let's get into it. Here's our chronological roadmap for today. First, creation and early years. Second, the First Age, which is all about the jewels. Third, the Second Age, focusing on the rings. Fourth, the Third Age and the war. And finally, number 5, the Fourth Age, dominion of men. Section 1, creation and early years. Okay, so we're starting before time itself. The supreme deity, Eru Ilúvatar, created these divine spirits called the Ainur. And get this, together, they literally sang the universe into existence through this grand cosmic symphony. It's like a giant choir building reality from scratch. But, every good story needs conflict, right? The evil we see way later on in characters like Sauron actually started right here with a spirit named Melkor. He was the most powerful of the Ainur, but his pride led him to weave these violent, discordant themes into the music. So fundamentally, chaos was baked in before the universe, known as Ea, and the earth, Arda, were even completely formed. So the greatest of these spirits, who are called the Valar, actually descend into Arda to shape it. But of course, Melkor follows them. The Valar create 2 massive lamps to light the world, but Melkor just shatters them. He destroys them so violently it permanently alters the continents. Retreating far to the west, the Valar then create the 2 trees of Valinor to bring light to their new sanctuary. And this right here sets up a massive divide. On one side, you have this golden, immortal age of peace in Valinor, bathed in the light of the 2 trees. On the other side, the vast, completely untamed continent of Middle-earth, just lying there in a dangerous twilight. And it's actually in this dark, starlit Middle-earth that Eru Ilúvatar's first children, the Elves, finally awake. Which brings us to the absolute catalyst for the centuries of bloodshed that follow. An incredibly gifted elven craftsman named Fëanor creates the Silmarils. These were 3 perfect jewels that actually captured the pure light of the trees. But Melkor allies with a terrifying, primordial spider named Ungoliant. Because, let's be real, in Middle-earth it's always giant spiders, right? They destroy the trees, steal the jewels, murder Fëanor's father, and then they flee. So, think about it. What happens when the actual light of the world is just stolen? Well, with Valinor suddenly plunged into complete darkness, Fëanor totally snapped. He renames Melkor Morgoth, which means the black foe of the world, and then he swears this terrible, unbreakable oath to reclaim those jewels at literally any cost. He ends up leading a massive elven rebellion right back to Middle-earth. Section 2, First Age, the Jewels. Now, unlike the stories you might know best, this entire age isn't driven by rings at all. It's driven by jewels. This era makes up the bulk of Tolkien's book, the Silmarillion, and it's practically defined by the fallout of Fëanor's tragic oath. The First Age really kicks into gear with the first rising of the sun and the awakening of men. And what follows? Centuries of brutal, cataclysmic war against Morgoth's armies of orcs in Beleriand, over in the westernmost part of Middle-earth. It's a really dark time filled with fallen elven cities, but there's also incredible heroics, like the mortal man Beren and the elven princess Luthien literally sneaking into Morgoth's fortress to cut a Silmaril straight out of his crown. How wild is that? All of this endless bloodshed finally culminates in the War of Wrath. This is triggered when the mariner Eärendil actually sails west to beg the Valar for help. The resulting battle is so unbelievably destructive that the entire landmass of Beleriand physically sinks beneath the ocean. Morgoth is defeated and cast into the void, but the victory is kind of incomplete. Why? Because Morgoth's chief lieutenant, a spirit named Sauron, manages to slip away. Section 3, Second Age, the Rings. Because Sauron survived, this era shifts focus completely. We move away from the open war against Morgoth and zoom in on the growing ambitions of men alongside the insidious, quiet rise of a brand new Dark Lord. As a reward for fighting Morgoth, the faithful men were gifted this glorious island kingdom called Númenor. You can kind of think of it as the Atlantis of Middle-earth. But while they were busy building the most advanced human civilization ever known, Sauron was quietly building his own strength over on the mainland. He establishes the Dark Land of Mordor and begins constructing his massive tower, Barad-dûr. Now here is how Sauron almost won the whole shebang without firing a single arrow. Disguised as a friendly figure named Annatar, the Lord of Gifts, he shows up and teaches the elven smith Celebrimbor how to forge rings of power. But, you guessed it was a massive trap. While these rings were handed out to elven kings, dwarf lords, and mortal men, who by the way would later be corrupted into the Nazgul, Sauron secretly forged the one ring in the fires of Mount Doom just so he could control them all. Meanwhile, back with the mighty men of Númenor, things are going downhill. They grow overly proud and frankly terrified of death. Sauron spots this weakness and manipulates that fear, completely corrupting their society. As punishment for the rebellion, the supreme deity literally drowns Númenor beneath the sea. Only a handful of faithful survivors escape. They're led by a guy named Elendil, who, fun fact, is an ancestor of Aragorn, and they flee back to Middle-earth to found the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. The Second Age concludes with a truly desperate last stand. If you've seen the movies, this is the exact battle you see in the opening prologue. Elendil and the elven king Gil-Gilgalad form the last alliance of elves and men. They manage to defeat Sauron, and Elendil's son Isildur cuts the ring right from his hand. But here's the absolute kicker. Isildur succumbs to the ring's corruption and refuses to toss it in the fire. Section 4, Third Age, the War. Because that ring survived, Sauron's spirit endured. Now, this is the era most of us know best. It's totally defined by the fading power of the elves and this heavy, lingering shadow stretching over Middle-earth. The One Ring is absolutely the key to this entire era. It isn't just some powerful weapon. It acts almost like a Horcrux, right? Anchoring Sauron's life force directly to the physical world. And here's the crazy part. As long as it exists, that original musical discord that Melkor introduced tens of thousands of years ago, it's still active. It's still threatening Arda. Over the course of this 3,000-year age, Sauron slowly regains his strength. Meanwhile, the elves are basically isolating themselves in hidden havens like Rivendell and Lothlorien. Guided by wizards, especially Gandalf, the fractured free peoples eventually fight the epic War of the Ring. But, as we know, it isn't massive armies that actually win the day. Instead, this incredibly unlikely hero from the peaceful Shire, a hobbit named Frodo, carries that horrible burden all the way to Mount Doom and finally destroys the ring. But I want you to really think about something for a second. Why does chucking a piece of jewelry into a volcano fundamentally change the epochs of the entire world? Why doesn't it just mean Sauron is dead and everyone goes back to normal? What exactly makes it the end of an age? Section 5, Fourth Age, Dominion of Men. Let's dive into this final transition, because the destruction of the ring isn't just a military victory. It represents the ultimate cleansing of that ancient cosmic evil we've been talking about. See, without the One Ring's power, the magic of the Elder Days basically evaporates. The three elven rings lose their power entirely, which prompts the High Elves, like Galadriel and Elrond, to finally depart across the Great Sea. Aragorn takes his rightful place on the throne of Gondor. The time of elves, dwarves, and hobbits begins to quietly fade into myth, and the Dominion of Men, which is essentially human history, truly begins. So, your crucial takeaway here is that Frodo's journey was never just some localized war. It was literally the final domino falling in a 50,000-year cosmic struggle. From the destruction of the Two Trees, to the theft of the Silmarils, to the drowning of Númenor, and the forging of the Rings of Power. It was just one continuous, completely unbroken chain of cause and effect. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. Remember the music of the Ainur from the very beginning? If Eru Ilúvatar incorporated Melkor's chaotic discord into a grander design, was the entire tragic history of Middle-earth just the universe slowly, painfully correcting a wrong note? Was Frodo, standing right there at the edge of Mount Doom, always meant to be the final resolving chord in that symphony? It's definitely something to chew on. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer of Middle-earth's absolutely epic timeline.